Hello, and welcome to the Week 12 devlog for QuiVr, my HTC Vive archery game. This week we have a couple under the hood changes as well as some additions for the multiplayer and single player experience. Some changes in the map, some changes in the ways that the enemies work and the waves themselves. One of the biggest changes this week was upgrading from the VRTK, upgrading the VRTK toolkit, which this game heavily uses, to version 2.0 because I was using a woefully outdated version, and so a lot of the systems that you're used to in the game may have changed a little bit in the way that they work. I had to recalibrate both the bow positioning and the arrow positioning in your hand, so it may be a little bit different from what you're used to, but hopefully you'll be able to adapt, and it should work pretty much the same way and actually be a little bit more responsive and intuitive. Hopefully there's less bugs now, as a lot of eyes have been over the VRTK code base to make sure that it's as bug-free and generic and useful as possible for everybody. Another big thing this week is these new hands. I want to thank the user Monophobian. He did this kind of out of the kindness of his heart, because the previous gloves were really pretty terrible, and these are absolutely stunning. They fit the theme so perfectly. They're really beautiful, fully animated, just like the other ones. I had to do minimal work to get them working, so I want to give him another huge shout out because these are really fantastic. Additionally, he recommended that they look best with reflection probes in the scene, and so I decided to add reflection probes to the various positions where you can teleport to, and they have a pretty cool effect. In addition to making the gloves look nicer, you can kind of see the nice specular highlights. They give, I was able to kind of adjust the metal things in the game to be a bit more reflective of the environment around it. So there's some pretty nice specular highlights that now happen, and reflection highlights that happen on both the arrowhead itself and the kind of brushed brass around here. You can, as you go to different places, you can actually kind of see the dark rocks being reflected in here. Obviously, the reflections are a bit blurry, and that's the point, is they're kind of brushed metal, but you can definitely see the difference in environment here. And if you go into a multiplayer game, your helmet is pretty is less brushed or less blurry reflections, and you'll actually be able to see the environment around where you're standing reflected with the helmets. Behind me, before I turn around, are 3 new bosses that I've added to the waves because the current system was getting a little bit stale. After wave 20, it went into endless mode, and people were getting up into waves 60 and 70 with the new talent system and things like that. So I decided I didn't add a bunch more variation in the enemies, although I did make some of them harder. The orcs and spiders have a bit more health, and that doesn't affect single player. But for the multiplier effect that gets added as more people join the game, people were getting to those really high levels only in the multiplayer games. That's going to kind of start compounding the little difference, and you'll have to get another arrow or 2 into some of those later enemies to make them, to kill them. And so hopefully I'll bring down the max wave people are getting to a little bit. So I'll show you the 3 new enemies, or 3 new bosses that we have. So you can hopefully see this is the scale of the ogre, and he's already pretty big. He towers above this lower platform. We have kind of an orc creature that has a pretty nasty flail, as well as some serious armor. He has about the same health pool as the ogre, but his armor makes him much more difficult to hit. You have to be much more accurate with your shots. It'll bounce off the shield and the armor plates, so he's going to present a challenge in that way. And then I have two much larger creatures. I have this golem, which has this the awesome snow effect that's on everything right in here, so you can kind of see that he's part of the environment that around here. And he is kind of just a big monolithic creature. He stands nicely above that arch, and these two creatures are more brutish. They're just kind of damage sponges and big tanks. This guy, though, is huge. He goes up to the very top of that arch, so you're about eye level with him on these towers and things. He is absolutely titanic, and seeing him at full scale, I'm not going to ruin the surprise. It's for people who get past, let's see, wave 10, 20 is Cerberus, 30, 40. Wave 50, you'll be introduced to this guy, and he is quite the creature. So, in addition to that, you may notice some small map design changes. Now, the single player and the first player in a multiplayer game, if you're on the lower level, you're now centered. Before you were off to the side because I had evenly spaced each player out. So it was 1, 2, 3, 4. Now it's 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it's a little bit more asymmetric, the distribution on this main platform, but I think it lets the single player experience is a bit nicer, as well as it just gives a bit of organic. It makes it a bit more organic, the distribution on the platform. Additionally, there is a new area that you can shoot from. This is for specific defense of your castle, or when enemies get really close. It was a little hard to shoot them from there. And when they're here, this is when you're kind of frantically shooting with your bow. So this spot here makes the single player experience much easier. As you might notice, there's not too much space here. So I think it's a player 1, 2, 3, and 4. So player 4 doesn't really, 3 and 4 don't really get that access. So they'll be wanting to be somewhere else on the ramparts here. I've adjusted where the torches are on these areas, so they should be much easier to get at now, both on this tower and the right tower, the kind of the same setup there. So one of the biggest additions this week is in the multiplayer system, and that is the Spectator Mode. And this is really cool. Some people have seen me kind of pop into games in my development mode, play alongside people who are in live games playing, and with me being a spectator, and it's a pretty cool system. So if we go here and hit this hit multiplayer, we'll get brought into a multiplayer game. So now we're in a multiplayer game. If other people were on the same network version as I am, they would be able to jump in. And during the downtime before starting a game, and obviously right after a game starts, or right after a game ends, those are the same time periods, and during those 15-second intervals, every 5 waves, you have the option to spectate. So how this works, and it's not completely finished yet, is when you hit the spectate button, you drop out of being a normal player and instead get teleported into the middle of the arena where you have kind of the giant's view. So this is actually about as tall as that giant is in the game. And you are able to view everything that's going on, all the enemies and the players shooting their arrows from kind of this almost toy box perspective, where the creatures are really kind of action figures in size. And this is really, you just kind of have to experience. Viewing it from here doesn't give it justice, because you don't get the parallax of the eyes, and everything really does look like it's tiny. These guys down here the There's a couple of objects in the game. You can actually, if people give you arrows, you can grab them. These hands work. They don't block collision, so you can't put your hand in front of somebody and block their arrows that they're shooting. As well, you can't... I've tried to make these hands kind of ethereal. I'm not using the new glove because there's more geometry in it, and you could get more visibility blocks. So I want you to not be able to grief people by putting your hand or your head, which is also ethereal in view with the material. So I'd like you to be able to spectate, give yourself a break for 5 waves or so, just watch them continue. The enemies are dynamically difficult based on the number of active players. So if you drop out, you will be able to, you're not hurting your team because the enemies that are coming are going to be a bit weaker. You are able to stop spectating at any time, even in the middle of a wave. However, you are not allowed to start spectating at any time. You have to be during one of those break periods. The reason that you can stop spectating at any time is so that if all 4 people are spectating and a wave starts, you want to be able to say, oh shoot, I didn't realize that we were all spectating, so you can drop back in and keep fighting. But once you drop back in, you'll have to wait for the next waves. So some of the cool things you can do is this particular rock, it's the only one in the scene right now that does it, but it is special in that you can pick it up and play with it, but it's also a navigational obstacle. So if you put the rock down here and enemies come around, they will try to avoid it. So they'll kind of stream around it. I'm not sure how, if I want to, I'm just exploring that type of feature to give the spectators a little bit of interaction with the game, but I'm not sure exactly how I want to do that in the future. Because it's, I don't want to give the spectators too much influence over the game around them. It is more of a relaxation. But I do want to give you something to do. So you can grab the rocks, throw them around, place them somewhere else. Enemies will move them if you put them in somewhere where they can't really get through. So if I were to put the rock here, then enemies would kind of push it out of the way. They will try to avoid it, but if you screw too much with the navigation system, they'll kind of decide that it's not worth their time to try to avoid it. So you can put that rock anywhere. There's also a couple of little barrels and things around the scene that you have physics, so you can play with little things while you're watching it, but mostly it's just fun to watch the players play the game. I think that's about it. This system needs a lot of testing. I have been able to do some myself, but not with the drop-in, drop-out of spectating. It's more been I join the game as a spectator and then I leave as a spectator. So being able to come back in with the stop spectating should work correctly, but it still needs a bit of testing. I think that's about it for this week. I'm still working on looking at revamping the enemy system entirely, and I think that's probably going to be what I'm doing this coming week, as well as working a little bit on the audio system. The current music is not really tuned to be for the volume to be able to change with a simple slider, because there's a lot of moving parts in that, and each different audio piece has a different volume associated with it. So I'll be looking at either changing the volume, the music system entirely, or kind of refactoring the existing code base to work with a volume system. But I do have a person who's kind of helping a little bit with the music system, because I would like to get a nicer, more interesting music theme. This is great for now with the alpha view, but it's not gonna fly in the final game. So looking at trying to do a new audio system. Additionally, I'll be looking at working on the enemy system so we can get different types of enemies. The current wave system is really kind of hard coded in. It's thrown together, so it's a bit hard to extend, and the adding of enemies and different types of enemies and what enemies do is a bit complicated right now, or more so than I would like it to be. So I will be probably looking at changing how the enemy system works so that in the future I can bring more interesting enemies that fight back, that have special capabilities, and enemies that fly, teleport around, interact with each other, things like that. So I appreciate everybody continuing to play. It's always nice to be able to jump into a game to test out a new feature and have people available to play. So thanks very much, and I look for your continued feedback.